Well, Kevin, one other thing that I did that I thought was really important as I'm looking at retirement from Verizon in the near future, something
Hmm.
else I want to get back into. I did a little bit of prison outreach. So I did it
Hmm.
both at the local county jail and I did it at a Marcy State Prison, which is in upstate New York. And I found that work very rewarding because if I could not have arrested anyone, that would have been fine by me. But that's not the world we inhabit. But I saw so many young African Americans who were spending the best years of their life in jail. And I
Yeah.
really, really wanted to change that. And I started talking to some young brothers, finding out why they were in jail, things like that. And a lot of times it was simply having grown up without a strong male role model.
So welcome everyone to KAL Experience episode number 26. And I know I say this a lot when I have guests on, that I'm really excited and that we have a special guest on. But today's guest is maybe whatever that word is beyond special. Let's put it to like the next level. We have someone who I consider a mentor of mine, someone that I've known for about 2 years now, and someone who, when I first kind of got to meet Mike Mason here and having some conversations with him, I just knew two things. I knew that once I started this show, I knew that I wanted to find a way to get Mike and people like Mike's voice out there to, let's say, a different generation, because of how positively it's impacted me. And then I also knew that the way that our conversations would go, Mike, I've said this to a few people in the past, but when I would sit in the office with you at Verizon and have a conversation with you and you're, explaining a story or something that's happened to you in the past, and you're able to sort of transport me by using, details from the story from 10, 20, 30 years ago, it was just such a captivating thing for me and something that's resonated with me from that moment up until today, and something that I kind of strive to kind of do as well in my conversations and certainly in my show here. So we have Mike Mason here today. Mike is a former special agent with the FBI. He's held many roles in the FBI before retiring there and becoming the chief security officer of Verizon. And I met Mike, like I mentioned, a couple of years ago. And just want to ask you, Mike, how are you doing today? And thank you so much for joining.
Well, I'm doing great. And Kevin, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and to speak with your audience, and hope add some value. Hope I bring a different perspective. Hope I share a few things that maybe people find some value in.
That's excellent, man. I definitely appreciate that. So like I mentioned, just to kind of set the stage here a little bit, I had gotten involuntarily laid off at my job, and there was a networking event that was scheduled the same day, coincidentally, that I decided to go to. And I remember walking into this hotel. It was right in the lobby of this hotel. And I remember I was there. I was like, let me make sure I'm punctual, get there on time. We never know who's going to be there. And I saw Mike there. Mike, I'm not sure how tall you are, but I remember you being definitely quite a few inches taller than me, and you had a suit on, looking sharp. And I was like, okay. I was like, I don't think I've ever seen this person before, but I was like, I can tell this person is important. I want to definitely make sure that I, have an opportunity to introduce myself. And how tall are you, Mike, by the way?
Well, I'm 6'4", so
Six
not
four.
not not Kareem or anything like that, but 6'4".
There you go. Okay. Okay. So yeah, we got to talking there, and it just kind of led to, just like I mentioned, a relationship now. Now that I'm not with the company any longer, I went on to become a middle school math teacher, and we still have a connection and a relationship with each other, which I definitely cherish and certainly appreciate. So Mike, I wanted to start off. I mentioned the FBI, and I did a little bit of homework, little bit of research there, and noticed that you wanted to become a police officer before working for the FBI. And so I saw that was like around the time that you were in high school. So if you could walk us through a little bit about sort of what you remember to be like in your mindset at that time, when you felt like you wanted to become a police officer, into ultimately deciding that you wanted to take a different path.
Yeah, it actually predates high school. It was around seventh grade. We had a police officer who lived in the next block, Mr. Lloyd, and Mr. Lloyd was just somebody who I had so much respect for. He always looked good in uniform. He was always polite. He always had time to talk to all the young kids, and he was a Chicago police officer. So I started thinking about becoming a Chicago cop at that time. And I also, at the same time, wanted to become a Marine Corps officer, which I eventually became and served in the Marine Corps for 5 years. But then I started reading some books, and I started reading about the FBI, and it just sounded interesting. It sounded like something that could take me out of Chicago, that could get me to see a part of the world I'd never seen, parts of the United States that I'd never seen. So all of a sudden, that became my objective. And so I studied accounting in high school, and then I studied accounting in college, because at that time, I thought that's the only way I could get in, studying accounting or going to law school. I didn't feel like I could afford to go to law school, so I went the accounting route. But the reality is the FBI recruits from every academic discipline imaginable. So that didn't really matter that much, but I didn't know that at the time. So that's what I ended up studying.
Wow. That's quite fascinating. Okay. So you went, so accounting to, what was your first role with the FBI?
My first role after I got out of the academy was actually an undercover role. I was doing some narcotics undercover. And an interesting thing, the Bureau had gotten jurisdiction along with DEA only 3 years earlier. And so I was doing undercover work for which at that time there was no sort of formal training program. So basically I was African American and from the south side of Chicago, so people felt like I could do that role. Well, the reality is I had more in common probably with my fellow agents than I had in common with drug dealers, based on how I grew up and where I went to school and things like that. But I got into it thinking a little bit about theater and things like that. I got into it. But I got to tell you, after I went through a couple of close calls and then eventually went through the training, now it's a totally different environment. Now you have to go through 2 weeks of psychological training before you can do any kind of undercover. And then if you're going to do a specific type of undercover, you may undergo weeks of training before you're allowed to actually engage in that role. So I was pretty raw when I went out doing that, and I'm lucky, nothing bad ever happened.
Wow. Yeah. So let me ask this. What would you say was the most challenging aspect of having an undercover role?
Well, not slipping into a different identity. In other words, remembering how you had introduced yourself, remembering who you were, and actually staying in character the whole time. I never tried to be something I wasn't. So I didn't try to speak in a way that was not me. I didn't speak maybe the same way I'm speaking to you now. So it's a little bit more about when I was back in the neighborhood speaking. But I didn't try to be something that I wasn't because I didn't want to be called on that. And then you had to be careful about what was in your wallet, what was in your pocket. When you were driving your car, you had to make sure you didn't leave any identification around and things like that. So it was about making sure you didn't fail because you had not paid sufficient attention to detail. So undercover work to me is all about detail. Then it's about trying to find some comfort zone working in that environment. But I always felt like I was working for something good. I remember once, a quick story, we arrested a black guy from a project when I was first working undercover. And as we were coming out, I was the only African-American law enforcement official and everybody else was white. And this one lady came over to me and she said, "I can't believe you're working with them." And so I had to take that moment to make a point that I think is a point that's valid even today. I said, "Ma'am, you're right. I am working with them, but I am working for you. This guy is a heroin dealer. I've bought heroin from him 6 or 7 times." And I wasn't going to tell her all about the case, but I said, he doesn't care where his heroin goes. He doesn't care. And I was pointing to the children that were around her. I said, he doesn't care if it goes into his veins or her veins or his veins. And I said, that stuff destroys life. So I said, yeah, okay, I'm working with them. Guilty as charged, but I'm working for you. And I wanted to make that point crystal clear to her.
It's a quite a significant distinction to make there, and to take that opportunity to, inform her and educate her, like what the actual purpose is here behind your intentions, behind the intentions of that whole division, as a whole. So I think that's super important. So from there, what was your next role in the FBI?
Well, I went from there. I also did general crimes. So I did kidnappings. People often ask me what was one of my most rewarding cases, and I'd have to say it was a kidnapping where the child was returned, identified, returned 4 months later. I went out to have lunch with the family. It was really a wonderful thing. She'd been taken right before Christmas and recovered right at the end of May 1986. It's funny to think she's in her 30s today. Her
Wow.
birthday happened to be the same day as my birthday.
Oh,
And
wow.
I remember when I went out there the day after she was taken, all the Christmas decorations were gone. Everything, the tree, the lights, the presents, everything. When I went out there May 30th to have lunch with the family, all the Christmas decorations were back up. The lights, the tree, the presents, everything. It was 5 years after that thing happened that I could talk about it without getting teary-eyed. But
Yeah.
after my time as an agent working on the streets, I became a supervisor. Then from there, the number two in the Buffalo office. And then from there back to headquarters, out to run my own office in Sacramento, California, called back to run the office in Washington, D.C., which was our second largest office, and eventually promoted to executive assistant director and one of the three highest ranking African Americans in the FBI's history to this day.
Wow. What an honor and what a significant sort of sort of position to have been in yourself, and then to also to have experienced these things and to be in these different types of roles that were so I can only imagine, just based on what you're sharing and what you shared with me in the past, just so rewarding to be doing something that is helping people. And yeah, I think that, and so something that's obviously challenging and requires, like you mentioned earlier, that level of discipline and sort of making sure that you're not slipping up, but knowing that all that work and all that energy and effort that goes into that, the other side of it is when you have these types of moments like you mentioned, with the kidnapping incident that you just mentioned. That's just, I mean, I can't really think of any other words. It's just such a powerful thing to know that you had something to do with that positive resolution, you know?
Well, Kevin, one other thing that I did that I thought was really important as I'm looking at retirement from Verizon in the near future, something
Mm-hmm.
else I want to get back into. I did a little bit of prison outreach. So I did it both at the local county jail and I did it at a Marcy State Prison, which is in upstate New York. And I found that work very rewarding because if I could not have arrested anyone, that would have been fine by me. But that's not the world we inhabit. But I saw so many young African Americans who were spending the best years of their life in jail. And I
Yeah.
really, really wanted to change that. And I started talking to some young brothers, finding out why they were in jail, things like that. And a lot of times it was simply having grown up without a strong male role model. And so one of the things that I wanted to do and want to continue to do is to try to steer people away from jail, steer people away from prison. It broke my heart when I would go to those things and I'd see guys, in their early 20s, early 30s, guys who had been in jail 10, 12, 14, 15 years. And it just bothered me. I mean, one guy told me, he said, Mr. Mason, if they let me out right now, he
Mm-hmm.
said, I wouldn't even know how to navigate my way home. And I thought, man,
Mm.
that's what's wrong. That's why, we need to do more in terms of prison education to cut down on recidivism, number of people going back to prison. And people think that that's a foolish use of public tax dollars. I
Mm-hmm.
don't. I think it's a good use of tax dollars because if you can educate people and you can integrate them into society, then you're not paying $100,000 a year to keep them incarcerated. And I just
Mm.
want to see more African Americans out doing the right things and not stuck in jail, wasting the most precious thing any of us have, and that's our lives.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I think, well, one is you mentioned about mentorship and the importance of having a mentor or mentors, people that you can look up to, and people, and we talked about this before, Mike, people where it's a two-way street. So
Right.
I did consider you, one of my mentors. I also have mentees myself. And I can say that being someone, in the middle there, and knowing how rewarding it is to work with the youth, whether that's, as a teacher, whether that's working with students or the youth in my church and things like that. I remember, and I'll mention it now, I remember when I first had a chance to meet you and a few other people that I consider mentors of myself, and having some trepidation to reach out as often as I wanted to, because I felt as though I was, your availability was different than mine, and I did not want to be a burden. I remember feeling that way, and I remember that would often cause, instead of reaching out to you, every 2 months or every month or something, it would be a lot longer, because I'd be like, all right, maybe it's too soon. And I remember talking to you about just how rewarding that element was and still is to your job compared to pretty much anything else that you're doing right now at Verizon, for example.
Mhm.
That's what drives you. That's, being able to pay it forward because people have done that for you in the past. So I think that's incredibly important. And then on the prison aspect, the first thing that I thought of as you were explaining that is, I'm thinking about, and I forget exactly where the studies were, but I remember having some conversations and reading some publications about how when people who have been incarcerated for a number of years get out, um, just like you mentioned, them not having sort of a clear indication on how to navigate that new world, and realizing for them is like, well, the being out of prison, is that better for me to be out of prison where I'm scrapping, I'm trying to figure things out, versus, okay, I have a meal here, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. I think that's an extraordinarily sad thing to think that a lot of people have that perspective, and it might be, unfortunately, it might be true for them. That it might be true because of the fact that maybe there aren't enough resources out there for them to be able to learn those types of things.
But Kevin, I got to tell you, I had a young brother tell me, he said, I'm afraid of getting released. And you want to talk about something where I could feel my heart breaking. I said,
Mm,
man, I got to get you away from that, because anything is better than spending your life locked up.
yeah.
I tried to give them a zest for life. I stood up in front of 200 prisoners one time and I said, the thing that separates me from you all is not a car, it's not a house, it's not how much money I make on my job, it's none of that. It's that I get to walk out of here when we're done. I
Hmm.
wanted them to see their freedom as the brightest crown jewel that each one of them have. And when that
Yeah.
guy told me that, but you think about something, you think about somebody who was put in prison, let's say 25 years ago when they were 18, and they're going to get out when they're 47 or whatever. And you think about that, 43, and you think, look at how much technology has evolved since that time.
Yeah.
And how is that person without any education, without any introduction to technology that exists today, how's that person, Kevin, even going to apply for a job? Half
Yeah.
the jobs you apply for today, you apply for online. If that person doesn't understand what online means,
Yeah.
how are they going to succeed? So I think that as a society, we have to spend money on that. When I see all the things happening with in the wake of the tragic homicide, an inexplicable homicide of George Floyd, I semi understand it, but nothing's ever advanced by burning a car. Nothing's ever advanced by destroying a business, especially a business of a minority owned business where that person's put their heart and soul and everything into that business.
Yeah.
But how about making small donations to the Innocence Project, to the Institute for Justice that's in Just Mercy, things like that? How can we reach back if we have skills? And more of us walking the streets today have skills that we don't know the value of. But how
Yeah.
about spending some time educating young people about cyber skills, because at the end of the day there is a cyber divide in this country, and man, if you can't operate a computer, not 5 years from now, right now, you are
Hmm.
barely employable in this country. Something like 80% of the jobs touch a computer at
Hmm.
some point, varying levels from that's just how you sign in all the way up to that's how you do your job. Every
Hmm.
98% of the people at Verizon now are working from home in the wake of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Imagine if you have zero computer skills. How's a company like Verizon even going to hire you?
Hmm.
So there's a lot of good things a lot of us can be doing to tamp down the number of African Americans today that are just wasting valuable, precious days and years in prison.
Mm. Yeah, that's also very powerful, man. I'm as you're saying that, I'm thinking of how someone watching this, someone listening to this, feeling as though they're enlightened and they're more aware now of some of the things that are going on, maybe that they're not thinking of on a daily or weekly basis. And I've said this a few times in the past, and I've mentioned the importance of having a mentor. I think that, of course, there are a lot of different things that people can do, but I do feel as though um, like finding opportunities to mentor the youth, to work with the youth, is, if a lot of people took that seriously and actually did that, and it doesn't need to be an overwhelming sort of thing where there's a whole lot of time from your week, but there's just like an opportunity to give back here and there. I think that would pay dividends. It would have such a significant impact. And so for anyone listening, I would say that, who's wondering what types of opportunities, like there's a ton of nonprofits out there. And even, whether you're a church going person or people in your community, or you go back to your old high school, middle school, like there's opportunities to kind of do that. And there's definitely a need for it.
Yeah, and you don't even have to join a formal program, but you do
Mm-hmm.
have to be intentional about it. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I've mentored, I think, literally across the expanse of my career, hundreds of people. And it's to me, it's about being committed to that better world that we all want.
Yeah.
It's about reaching out. Kevin, I was raised by a neighborhood in Chicago, but I was raised by a village. I mean, I was raised by neighbors that cared about me. I've got so many people that I could thank right now if they were all still alive, and many of them I did. In my sophomore year in college, I wrote a letter a week to somebody who had touched
Wow.
my life. And this was before computers. This was
Mm.
before I could cut and paste the body of the letter. I had to type it out on a typewriter. Some
Mm-hmm.
of your audience may not even know what I'm talking about. But my point is, you don't have to work even real hard. It's about telling a young kid, correcting them a little bit. One time I'm cursing my head off at the public park across the street from where I live. And one of my neighbors who lived down the block called me over. And he said, Mike, you're better than that. And I said, what are you talking about? Trying to deny what he had heard. And
Mm-hmm.
he said, now, how would your daddy feel about you swearing like that? Well, I tried to convince him how my father would feel so he wouldn't have to have that conversation. But
Mm-hmm.
my point is, it was little touches like that. Kevin, I think I am one of the luckiest guys in the world because I had little touches like that all along my life. I remember my
Mm-hmm.
friends coming from high school were swearing on a bus, and a lady turns around and says, would any of you be talking that way if I was your mother, if I was
Mm.
your sister, if I was your aunt, if I was your grandmother? And
Yeah.
man, all of us said, no, ma'am. And Kevin, I never swore on a public conveyance ever again. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
do it when I was at the zoo, when I was walking down a city block. She raised my consciousness that
Mm-hmm.
we live in a community and
Mm-hmm.
we live in a shared community. But it's that kind of reaching out that I think has diminished somewhat, and that's why we have so many aimless people who don't have objectives. Because these guys in prison, nobody had ever said, "Man, you are smart. Are you kidding me? You could
Yeah.
be." I told one guy he could be a drug dealer. I mean, he could be a drug dealer. He was a drug dealer. That's why he was in jail.
Yeah.
But I told him, I said, man, brother, you could be a businessman. And he said,
Yeah.
Mr. Mason, how am I going to be a businessman? I said, listen, you know about supply and demand. You know about quality assurance. You know how to price your product competitively. You know about distribution. You know about staffing. You know about competitive practices. It's just that you're working with an illegal commodity. So,
Yeah.
it was about translating those skills
Yeah.
that made him, well, he was successful until he was not. A successful drug dealer could make him he could have been a proprietor of a corner store somewhere, man. So
Mm-hmm.
what we have to re-engage in our community is hope and imagination. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
don't have those two things, you are destined for bad things.
Mm-hmm. Man, that story about the bus too, like that's powerful, that something said to you so long ago. And I think, hopefully a lot of people have these types of moments that are sort of transformative, and we can reflect back on, and transformative in a positive way. And we reflect back on that. That's such a simple thought. If I was your mom or your grandmother or someone like that, would you be
Right.
doing this? And the answer is not a chance.
That's
Not
right.
a chance. I
That's
would
right.
not
Not a
have,
chance.
right. And that to stick with you is very powerful. So Mike, let me segue into your transition into your current role and sort of what happened, right? You retired from the FBI, and then did you immediately know that you wanted to continue working in some capacity? And if so, is where you're at right now, where you kind of saw yourself going to once you left the FBI?
Well, ironically, I mean, I came straight to Verizon from the FBI at about 2 weeks off. Ironically, I didn't think about Verizon per se, but I did think about working in the security industry because that's where I felt my stock was most valuable.
Hmm.
And now, as I'm approaching retirement, the next things I want to do don't have anything to do with security. It has everything to do with figuring out how can I expand the village that was so kind to me when I was growing up. That's my objective going forward. How do I expand that village?
Hmm.
So I didn't think a lot about Verizon per se, but I thought about this kind of role. And since I had come from a very senior role in the FBI, I was looking for a senior. I wanted to be the chief security officer. I didn't want to be someone's deputy or something like that. It's not that I couldn't have been, but that wasn't what I was seeking. And one thing
Hmm.
about my life, Kevin, that I would tell everybody, I've been very intentional about it. I
Hmm.
think you always have to be setting goals. I'm setting goals now for after I retire. I have things I want to do. So it
Yeah.
doesn't stop because I'm 62 years old. Man, I'm as excited about my life today as when I was going off for college the first time. And that's what I think people have to be. Otherwise, you wake up 30 years from now with a job and you say, I don't know where the time went. It just went
Hmm.
away. Well, no, if I get hit by a bus today, the person looking down on me is going to see a smile on my face because I'm going to say it was a good ride.
Hmm. Powerful. Powerful, powerful. All right. So let me go into just a couple more questions before we wrap up for the day, Mike.
Sure.
And this, I'm having a great time, and I'm excited for people to hear this conversation and be uplifted and learn something, be entertained, be educated, be motivated, inspired, whatever that element is for them, right? To be able to kind of apply some of these things that we're talking about, to their life. So one of the questions, as I started sort of incorporating having some guests on my show, and sort of thinking about what types of questions do I think are interesting and compelling
Mhm.
to ask anyone in any type, walk of life. And I'm going to ask you this first one. Um, so if you had an opportunity to have something, whether it's a picture, words, sentence, anything, on a billboard, my question for you is, what do you think you would want to have put there?
Would this be something about me or a message that I want to deliver to other people? What a little bit more specifics, but
A
if
little
it's
more.
about either of those two things, I think I know what I'd want to be on a billboard.
Yeah.
I would basically say that you have to work to achieve your dreams. That
Hmm.
nothing is handed to you. I mean, this is more than one sentence, but the bottom line would be, I would think that wishing is for dreams and working is for goals. And I
Mm,
believe people have to set goals. I might say, I want to win the lottery. Well, I can't do anything to impact winning the lottery. So that's just a wish. I can't
hmm.
do anything with that.
Hmm.
But goals can be achieved by setting up a journey. How do you want to achieve that goal? And you don't have to know what you're going to do for the next 20 years or the next 40 years. You just have to know what you're going to do for the next year. But
Hmm.
it's very sequential. I didn't end up where I am now just wanting to do that, putting on a suit and jumping into that life. It started
Mm.
it started when I was very, very young. So I would say understand the difference between wishing and working. That would be the sign I'd want to put up if I was putting it up in the neighborhood.
I love that. And that's powerful too, because to me, that's like we've heard, like I forget exactly what the saying is, but like the whole idea about the importance of knowing that in order to get something, some type of goal, something that you're striving towards, that it does take work. As you're saying that again, I'm thinking about myself right now in this current situation I'm in, starting this YouTube channel, having this for about 7 months, and knowing that this thought about having a platform to be able to communicate with people And those people are going to be a small amount of people when I first start out, and will continue to grow, whether those are people that are in my circle or people that are just discovering my content from across the world. And thinking about how people like yourself and a few others who have been on as guests so far, to give them an opportunity to share some knowledge, share some experiences with people. But hey, this stuff that I'm doing right now, like, it does take work. It does take work to schedule. It does take work to edit the videos, to put the content in a way that's concise enough for people's attention span, all these types of things. And
Right.
for me, what I'm realizing is when I think of it being work, it takes time and it takes effort to do. But man, if it's not incredibly rewarding when someone says, "Hey, I watched that interview with Mike Mason from the FBI and it changed my life. It changed my perspective. I was struggling trying to figure some things out, and that conversation really helped me." These types of things are, as you mentioned, as you know, both of us were saying earlier, like, these are the things that drive me to not interpret it as work, but more so interpret it as something that is helping me reach that goal, which is just having this platform to be able to send positivity out there to the people that have, helped me, a way to pay it forward. So that's an awesome response there. I definitely like that.
Well, life is too short not to get up every day enjoying what you do. I'm not going to say that I would do my work for free, because everybody's got to earn a living.
Yeah.
But I've been blessed that for 42 years, every day that I get up, I have looked forward to going to work. And that's the honest to goodness truth. I have looked forward to going to work. And I just think it's about instilling that vision in young people today, that they can do anything. I love that you're a math teacher. I love that. I love that we can tell people there's nothing magical about math. It's a subject that our kids can embrace, and that can lead to so many other things. But you're in a very powerful position as a teacher. Everybody's got a story about 2 or 3 favorite teachers. Everybody.
Right.
And
Right.
that's a powerful position.
It is. I do not downplay that for a second. Knowing that I wanted to do something that was going to have more of a day-to-day impact than what I was doing previously at Verizon, and knowing that teaching most likely was going to do this for me, but not realizing just how effective and how powerful that is. Like you just mentioned, going there. Okay, some people say you have to be on at all times as a teacher, and that could be challenging and all these types of things. But when you talk about that element of waking up every day, doing something that you enjoy doing, I've tried to share it with as many people as I can, and in a way to encourage them to say that if there's one piece of advice that I have, it's to, if you're not in that type of role right now, to find a way to get there. You may not be able to get there tomorrow based on your credentials or based on X, Y, and Z. But what were we talking about earlier? We're talking about goal setting and things like that. That is, we live in a country where it's doable. You're not trapped. You might feel it, but you're actually not trapped where you're at right now. There's opportunities out there. And anyone listening to this, reach out to me. Let me know. I'll be happy to continue encouraging, just because I see what it's done for me. When Sundays roll around now, there was not one Sunday throughout the entire school year, one Sunday where I'm like, oh man, the work week, I'm like pumped up to get some math material, make it fun, make it interesting.
Right.
And that's an unbelievable, it's hard to put in words. It's an unbelievable feeling, and something that I'm just very grateful for the opportunity. And I feel a call to action to articulate and explain ways for other people to kind of, continue to figure out a path for them that can get them somewhere where they love to be.
Absolutely. They just have to engage. And I'm 62 years old and can remember something my first grade teacher told me. I was late to class one day, and she said, "Honey, it's okay. Just don't ever be late to my class again." That was Mrs. Thompson. And I can remember that today. That happened when I was maybe 7 years old. So now you think
Wow.
about that for me. I'm 62 today. And
Yeah.
yet, I could recount, if we had time, a dozen exchanges with teachers that were powerful exchanges.
Yeah.
All she was telling me was, my expectations of you are up here. And I expect you to achieve that, young man. I was in second grade. She was a big woman too, so I had a little peer pressure there too. But I was determined not to be late ever again, and I wasn't.
Wow. Powerful stuff. Yeah. And just the fact that you remember that today that's a testament to how impactful, those types of interactions can possibly be.
And I'm
All
sure
right. So
sure you're having those with students today.
definitely. And that's the thing. I didn't realize that I might be until hearing from people like you and hearing from others who are able to reflect on that type of stuff from years ago. So it's
Absolutely.
very motivating. So what would you say, and you've given, it might be one of the ones that you've given already. What would you say like the best piece of advice that you've ever received in your life was? Or if not, if you can't think of one, what was one of the best pieces of advice?
Well, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was somebody told me, don't talk about anybody till you know everybody, and you ain't ever gonna know everybody, so just don't talk about anybody. So that was a piece of professional advice I got one time when I was in the FBI, and I thought, boy, that was really good advice because you don't know where all the dots are connected. But the other piece of advice I got that I thought was really important is be careful about who you try to impress in this world. Because think about if you crash and burn, are those same people going to be there? A lot of people in jail today. When I'm doing that jailhouse outreach, a lot of people are in jail today because they didn't have the courage to say, no, I'm not going to go with you on that. I don't want to do that. One of my friends who was an FBI agent, his friends came over to get him one time when he was about to have dinner. And he said, no, I can't go with you. Where they were going to steal Pepsi bottles. Back in the day, you used to get 2 cents deposit, and you steal a couple of hundred of them, you got a few dollars. And what happened was when they went to do it, a security guard surprised them, an old man, and one of the young guys, 17, turned around and hit the guy. The guy fell, hit his head on the curb, and died. And that guy went to prison. He went to prison for just about the rest of his life. So
Wow.
you have to own your own life. You have to own your own destiny. My father used to tell me, you are always going to be responsible for your own life. Don't come telling me what somebody else did. And I got to tell you, Kevin, that was sage counsel, to tell young people today, you own your life. Stop making excuses. How many parents say who have a child who's troubled, my kid was really good until they fell into bad company. Yeah, where's the original bad company? Your kid can't be a genius here and a dummy here. So I tell kids, keep being a genius. You got to chart your own course. You got to own the reins of your own life. Because the one power that all of us have is the power to choose. We never get taken from us the power to choose. So I would tell kids, make your own choices in this life because you're going to have to live with them longer than anybody else.
Man, I like that too. That's a nice clip right there. I'm gonna have to take that and share that with people, if not anything else, to kind of take ownership and know that you're making these decisions for yourself.
Absolutely.
And I love how you circle back with the be careful who you choose to impress, who you try to impress. That has its inherent dangers, right? And thinking about what types of things, especially for the youth, where we know that's peer pressure and things like that come up, maybe a lot more prevalent. That's definitely very powerful.
Oh, that happened with drinking with me, with smoking pot, with trying coke. All of those things were foisted upon me, and I just told people that's not what I want to do. And you have to know what you want to do. You have to know what that answer is before you're confronted by it. And I didn't care that 4 of my friends were standing over there. Oh, man, come on. You're not going to have a beer with us? It didn't matter to me. I said no because I knew what I wanted to do with my life. And I knew that was not going to take me in the direction I wanted to go. So I own my life. People can talk about religion and mentors and a lot of other good things, but I own my life. I'm responsible for my life and only me. Only Mike Mason is responsible for this life. And everybody's got to take custody, if you will, of their own life, custody of their own future. I'm not waiting for somebody to design my journey. I'm going to design it.
Got you. Love it, man. I got one more question for you.
Sure.
I'm I'm thinking of a dream concert that you're going to, and there's 5 artists that are going to be there, and they could be living or they could be deceased. Who is going to be at your dream concert?
At my dream concert. Okay, this is going to really challenge your audience. Well, Johnny Mathis would be first because I've loved him since I was a kid. I loved his music all the time. I'm so sorry that she's gone, but Whitney Houston, who has such a beautiful, beautiful voice. And then another one that might be a surprise is Josh Groban because I love his singing. Somebody I always wish I had seen in concert is Diana Ross. I wish I'd
Mm-hmm.
seen her. I mean, I don't know if she's still performing, but I never saw her in concert. And I would
Mm-hmm.
love to see Stevie Wonder in
Oh
concert. And
man.
that's just a short list. I have others
Yeah.
like Barbara Streisand and other people that I would love to see. But believe it or not, I liked Johnny Mathis when I was 7 years old. My mother said, "You're old before your time." And I've been to 2 of his concerts. And I got to tell you a cute story. The first one I went with a girlfriend. And I said, "Oh man, please sound like the record. Please sound like the record." And man, he opened his voice, and it was beautiful. Bruno Mars, of young people, Bruno Mars might be one of the people I'd love to see in concert as well.
Yeah, powerful. I love that. Yeah, my wife is a huge Whitney Houston fan. We actually we were painting, or I should say whitewashing, our brick fireplace yesterday. And my wife Jess, she was doing like the left side and took a break, and then I started doing the right side. And she was not feeling the attention to detail or the lack of skill that I was doing with it. So she said, "All right, you go ahead, sit down." She said she's gonna do pretty much do it all. So I was like, "All right, don't worry, Jess." I was like, "I'm gonna go ahead and put a nice playlist on you playlist on for you to listen to." So I threw some Whitney Houston on for her, and she's a huge fan of hers as well. And we actually watched that years ago. There was like in the theaters, it was a documentary movie based on her life that was quite powerful, actually. A lot of
Well, she's
kind of
gone
wild.
before her time, and I
Yeah,
hope people take lessons, both good and bad, from her life. But what a
definitely.
voice! What a God! Her voice sounded like a bell. I mean, so clear, and the
Hmm.
range of her voice. She's just too talented to be gone so soon.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So those are the questions I had for you today. Before we end though, I wanted to see if there was anything else that you would like to share with my audience. Whether if you wanted people to be able to reach out to you or anything like that, you're more than welcome to do that. And if not that, if there's anything else that you want to share before we close today.
Well, as I'm in a transitional period in my life right. And that'd be difficult to have a lot of people reaching out for me as I'm wrapping up one career and I'm moving to Virginia and I've got a lot of things going on. But the
Yep.
one thing I would tell your audience is you have to believe in the power of the individual. You have to believe in the power to shape your own life. I don't care where you are right now. Your current situation does not dictate your future environment. And I'm a little black kid from the South Side of Chicago who rose to be fourth on the food chain of the FBI, still one of the 3 highest ranked African Americans in the FBI's history. And I
Mm.
think a lot of that was simply because I believed I could. And then you have to understand it's a journey. It's not leaping across the Grand Canyon in one single bound. It's taking all the steps you need to take. But you have to believe in yourself. No matter what I say, no matter what you say on your show, these young kids have to wake up and say, I own my life. I will have a different life. I will dictate my journey. And that's what I would say in closing to your audience. I hope these young people get some fire and say, I can be whatever I want to be, because you really can be.
Mm-hmm. That's the truth. Thank you so much. Definitely very excited about getting this episode out, and I'm just appreciative. I know that these types of things, just knowing you, I know that these types of things are mutually beneficial. Like, you enjoy doing these things just as much as I enjoy kind of learning myself from it and sharing the knowledge. But I would be remiss if I didn't just extend, especially knowing that you have so much going on right now, my gratitude for taking some time out today to talk to me and to my audience.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me. And how can you say no when I think about all the good things you're trying to do to impact so many people's lives? So this was really a pleasure and a privilege of mine to be part of your show.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right, guys, you guys take care, and I will see you guys next week.